see real quick.
I'm sorry, y'all.
It's fine. Part of being a teacher is always fighting technology.
I'm sorry. Can I get assistance? Like, it's showing up on the computer, but not on the meeting board. Wait,
Is this a Chromebook?
no, I don't
It
think.
should be, I don't know why it's not. You might wanna shut, because for whatever reason, this isn't responding. So you might wanna shut it down as you.
Hey, Jerome, do you have that on the slide presentation?
It's a
I'm sorry.
PowerPoint.
It's a PowerPoint?
Yeah.
Okay.
Would I be able to plug my flash drive in and would that work?
It might be, yeah.
Jennifer, try emailing me the PowerPoint. Could you do
Let's
it,
see
you
if
would,
this works.
you would do it that way?
There you go. Unless it's not Microsoft supported. Oh, there you go.
Sweet.
Like I said, that's totally part of being a teacher. Never works, right?
All right. The purpose of the civil rights movement was to ensure that black people would have the same equal rights as white people. But it wasn't just black people that were fighting for, it was just all people in America. I'm sorry. All right, moving on. Understanding the differences between racism and prejudice. Simply, racism is the idea of people, like people of one race, feeling that they are superior because they were born into a race and other races are under them. And a prejudice is just making a judgment about anyone before you even get to know that person. Like anyone could be prejudiced. Like that's like, say if you see someone who's 6'10", 250 pounds strong, what y'all would think he does? And please sport, yeah, LeBron James and a Meek. That's a prejudice. He might just be a computer nerd, but that's a prejudice towards someone. And as far as racism in the civil rights movement, with all the laws being passed, systematic racism was used. And systematic racism are laws to keep black people in line and under white people and not give them the same rights. Some of these laws were Jim Crow laws, and they insisted of them not being able to get the same housing benefits, not them being able to vote, like they would have to go through many things to vote. And it was just like not an equal education. And as far as, I'm sorry, then you would have black codes, and black codes, they were the same as Jim Crow laws, but it was just a different phrase that certain places in America would use. Now we get to the protests. Being the first major protest was Rosa Parks' protest. And when she decided not to get out her seat, she wasn't trying to be an activist or anything. She was just tired. She had a long day at work, and she just did not want to give her seat up, because the same thing that man did as he got off work and he was tired, he wanted to sit down and go home, she wanted to do the same thing. And the next protests we will see are the sit-in protests. And this was when some young black students, they would go to a segregated bar and they would sit at the countertop, and they would not leave after being refused service. And what they went through was harsh, and they were strong to go through that, because they had drinks poured on them, mustard, ketchup, all type of foods, and it was just horrible for anyone to go through that. And it was just horrible, man. And as far as other protests, people would protest lynching and the Ku Klux Klan. The Ku Klux Klan, it was born in 1865 in Tennessee, and it was a secret society at first. And members of the Ku Klux Klan, they were former Confederate soldiers, and they were in positions high-ranking governments. In the South, they were the judges, they were the police, and black people would be sentenced to unfair trials, and they would be sentenced to jail longer than white people who would commit the same crime. But not only that, they would go to labor camps, and the labor camps was another way to enslave black people. So they was trying to do whatever they could to keep slavery alive. All right, moving on to the Brown versus Board of Education. This was the fact, what this did was roll out separate but equal, Plessy versus Ferguson. And what this did was, it ruled out all segregation as far as public education. And the first, I'm sorry, I'm a little nervous.
Hey, you go ahead, bro.
All right, and we first saw this, segregation end with schools in many different places. Like you had the Little Rock Nine, they were the most prominent of that time. But then in New Orleans, we had Ruby Bridges, and the school she went to was William France Elementary, and it was changed, not recently, but it was changed into McDonald 19. And the Civil Rights Act of 1964, what this did was it eliminated all segregation and it gave black people their rights. So black people will have the right to vote. They would have, it gave them equality, basically. Like black people had, this was something they was fighting for, and the government finally gave them that. And moving on. You have the Voting Rights Acts of 1965. And what this did was, it stopped all systematic racism of stopping black people to vote. Like, what some black people had to go through, they would have to go through literacy tests and just anything to keep them from voting. So what this did is it canceled all that, and it gave them like it gave them the right to vote without being prejudiced. I'm sorry, y'all. It gave them the right to vote without being held back by Southern laws, Jim Crow laws, or anything. And now we come to the assassination of Dr. King and Malcolm X. Like the video earlier said, Malcolm X was a radical. He was any means necessary to get what we needed. He was the type of person to match energy. Like we may come peaceful, but if you get out of line, we'll get out of line.
Mm-hmm.
And following his death, he was murdered by the Nation of Islam, people he was once aligned with. He was kicked out of the Nation of Islam because the leader feared that he was becoming too powerful, and people looked at him as the leader. So the leader, like the first chance he could, he kicked him out. Following being kicked out, Malcolm X took a pilgrimage to Mecca, and during that he realized that what the Nation of Islam taught was wrong, and that it was white people are the problem. And what he learned there was that not white people are the problem, racism is the problem. Being torn down by the same people of skin color is the problem. And he became more philosophic, and he grew into a Martin Luther King type role. And with Martin Luther King, his assassination, it like the whole country mourned, because it was just like, we killed a preacher, we killed a man of God. Like he was truly, like he didn't have any hate in his heart, any protest. He would preach nonviolence, like let them do what they must to us, let us show them that we belong here. And following his death, it was many protests, many riots. But after all that happened, the country truly mourned his death. And this was the first time that the country really came together. And everyone just, I wouldn't say they huddled around each other, but they came with open arms, because it was like, all right, we see the problem. Like his death put it on a worldwide, for the world to see. That was the end of that. But moving on from protests, from civil rights protests, what do we see? What did the civil rights protests, let me rephrase my question. How did the civil rights protests shape many of the protests we see today? Yeah.
They kind of like paved the way to show that, like, even if you're suppressed, like, you can protest.
I'm sorry, I can't hear the last part you said.
If you're suppressed, you can protest without consequences.
Yeah, that's right. And just also, it showed people that like, when you have many people come together, like you can make a change. But it's certain differences with the civil rights movement and Black Lives Matters and LGBTQ. Yeah.
It's kind of like a message they're trying to say, like, you can't own me, you're not my master, so you can't control me and what I do.
All right. And y'all know any differences and similarities between Black Lives Matter, like any other protests today versus the civil rights? What's some things that's alike?
So they so the things that are like between them, they're kinda like it's kinda like they're protesting for freedom. So they can't be discriminated or feel bad because they can't control how they feel or what they look like.
Anyone knows?
Wait, is this for like how they're like,
I'm sorry.
is it for all of them for like equality?
And you said equality? But what's a major difference that we've seen in the civil rights movement that we don't see in 2021, like in protest today?
I think in the civil rights movement, that like all the people, they kind of, I feel like they all came together, but like now, they all, like some people want a peaceful protest, and now some people like want to go to the like protest, like wanting to fight.
Right. Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm gonna get to all y'all.
So now we have a lot more technology, and now people can like make videos and send it like to like Facebook and Instagram and telling people.
Yeah. Hey.
I saw this thing on the news where like, people were protesting because like where they live, like there's a lot of trash and like the government wouldn't do anything about it. So I mean, that's protests in the civil rights movement in 2021 were like can be both violent and peaceful.
And I know you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I was gonna say like what Kevin said, how like nowadays there's like more technology, so you can like put it out on like social media platforms. As like back then they didn't have that.
What does that mean though? Like, if you can put it out there, what are you doing with that?
You
More people can like.
you
You're
can,
reaching
like,
more
reach
people, right?
People reach them faster too.
So like in those protests, their voices are being heard.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear it.
In those protests, their voices are being heard.
And I knew one of you had your hand raised. Yeah.
In 2021, the protests could get like around the news easier and like faster because we have technology and
And guys, look, y'all are scratching the surface. Dig a little bit deeper. We were having this conversation yesterday. Like this conversation.
Think
Which-
about some of the definitions to what we looked at for the project yesterday. What are some of the things that were benefit for the civil rights movement that maybe today faces?
You want?
Yeah, the civil rights movement was nonviolent. The protests like today are like more broad than rather being strictly focused on like trying to like desegregate like everything because like during the civil rights movement they were just like focused on trying to integrate things, but now it's like broader and like LGBTQ and like more.
So you would say more diverse. So more diverse.
Yes.
And I know you had your hand raised.
I think in 2021 they're more frustrated when they protest because like they already know what happened, so like they don't want to deal with it again.
I was hoping you would say that. That was one of the hot things yesterday.
Yeah.
2021, some people just wanna go out there and like fight, like, and not like really protest, but like they wanna go out there for the violence.
Just protest.
You think that's really just a 2021 thing?
It's a joke.
But y'all missing one key fact. And I'm sorry, go ahead.
It was peaceful, the civil rights movement.
Yeah, you got those. But what's one thing that they were missing, like, that you knew about the civil rights movement that they don't have now? It's not clear, and you wanted to say something.
Oh yeah, the civil rights movement was more like on a broader, sort of like equality, and I think 2021 was more like pinpoint on some things.
What's the things you was?
So the civil rights movement was more about like equality in general, but the 2021 was more like pinpoint,
Alright, what's some of the things that they're pinpointing about?
like police brutality.
Alright, and just, this is my thing about, protests now and back then. We had Dr. Martin Luther King, we had Malcolm X, W.E.B., I'm sorry, I can't pronounce it. Yeah, Du Bois, yeah.
In the civil rights movement, like for 2021, the civil rights movement, like I feel like we had more leaders and followers.
That was good.
Well, what, Emily?
Leaders
Clear
and followers.
leaders and.
Leaders, so that was one of my main things about the protests back then. We had defined leaders, like, we knew Martin Luther King was a leader. We knew Malcolm X was a leader. We had an idea of who the leaders were, whereas now it's just like, all right, someone might put together a protest, but like, who is the leader? What is the goal of the protest? It's so broad. With the civil rights movement, it was pinpoint, like, this what we fighting for. This is our leaders. Like, we might have small local leaders, but our overall leaders on a national level, we had a clear idea of who that was. And you had something else you wanted to see?
Yeah, it seemed like in the civil rights movement, there was a lot more violence for the people against the protests than it is in 2021.
And you could say that again, just so I can write it down clearly.
So in the civil rights movement, it seemed like there's a lot more violence against the protests than it was.
You see that today as well?
Sometimes, but it doesn't seem as often. It doesn't seem to happen as often as it used to.
Alright, y'all, thank y'all for letting me teach. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. They knew what they were like going there for. Like they knew that they were gonna go there and like fight for what they wanted. Like they didn't just go there. Just, like, I don't really know how to say it, but
Go ahead, take your time.
I just don't know how to put it. But like when they went, they knew what they were like going to fight for, and like they weren't hesitant about it.
Alright, and which one? Alright, y'all, thank y'all for letting me teach y'all class today.